Right, so first of all, good afternoon. Sorry, I don't speak Estonian. So if you don't understand anything I say, just put your hand up and just seriously don't be shy and ask me, and I'll try and explain what I meant. Second thing is, we're talking about business models, so I don't want to see anyone doing this, because obviously business models are the most exciting things we could be doing on a sunny afternoon, not having a beer outside or something. Right, so a bit about me first of all. I don't know what this noise is coming out. I hope that's not my brain. Anyway, we'll carry on. So who am I? So I was born in Cambridge. They're doing something upstairs. I was born in Cambridge, then I moved to London, and I started my first couple of businesses there. Then all last year and a bit before that, I was living in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley. Now I'm back in Europe, in London. I've done 6 startups. I've had 3 fails, sold one, one's still going, so hopefully that'll sell, and then one also last year, we're probably going to sell the IP, so that's kind of a half fail. Sure. Nothing like a technical hitch to get you started. Right. Is that better? Right. Good. It's not my magnetic personality then. Okay, so where were we? Really? It's my brain. Fine, we'll just keep going. You'll have to just put up with it. So I've raised money from about 40 investors, including VCs. Okay, so business models. First of all, who in this room is, I just want to know what the audience is. So who in this room is a student? Put your hand up. Okay, and how many in this room have a startup? Might be very small, might be very big. Okay, how many investors? We've got 2 in the corner. Okay, that's good. All right. Let's start with what a business model is, shall we? Wikipedia says, a business model describes the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. Nice and straightforward, right? But actually, before you can have a business model, you need an idea. And I want to talk about ideas just for a little bit before, because however good your business model is, if your idea is not good, you're dead in the water. And the world is full of ideas. And I've heard before with SmartStart when I spoke in Estonia last year, talking about wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. And really, there's only one thing that's different between a wantrepreneur and an entrepreneur. And that is, a wantrepreneur has an idea, but an entrepreneur goes and executes on it. And that's the only difference. So if you don't come up with a good idea, then it's going to be a problem. And I think one of the ways to work out whether it's a good idea or not is that your idea should solve a problem. It should solve someone's pain. Okay? And if you don't solve someone's pain, you're drastically increasing the chances of failure. The Genome Project has a report where they studied 3,200 startups, and they said 1 in 12 startups fail. And if you look at the UK government statistics, then 95% of all small companies fail. So that's 1 in 20. So you really have to solve a painful problem. So how do you think of a good idea? And some people have lots of ideas. Other people, I do have people coming to me saying, I don't know whether it's a good idea, or I don't know how to think of a good idea. Well, one of the things you can do is just look at your own life and look at your friends' lives. Look at the world around you. And I did this a while ago, and I was traveling a lot, and back in 2006, and one of the problems I had was that I wanted good recommendations for places when I went somewhere. So I wanted a good restaurant. And I was really frustrated because you go onto the internet and you go onto Yelp or Google Reviews or Zagat, and it says, oh, this restaurant, this fish restaurant is 8 out of 10. So it's a good fish. But what if I hate fish? Like, why is it 8 out of 10? It should be 0 out of 10 for me. It should be 0 out of 10. That restaurant shouldn't even be in front of my face because I hate fish. I don't hate fish, but if I did. So I wanted to solve this problem. So I created a company called Rumble, and we did precisely that. We solved the problem of bad recommendations. So I was solving a problem and a pain which I had. So one of the ways to think of good ideas is to study life. Another one is to stop focusing on your competitors. Or if you're not an existing company and you have a new idea, stop looking at all the people doing it already or doing similar things. And that's because I was in America last year, and they talk about FOMO. They love abbreviating things, Americans, I don't know why. And that's fear of missing out. And so if you look at your competitor, you go, oh my God, this company is doing all this cool stuff, and you're then infecting your innovation. You're affecting your ability to then go and actually do something different. Because if you're following your competitor, then you're not leading the market. You're not leading. So there's a great example of this, which is in about 2003, Nintendo was not doing very well. It was competing against PlayStation, competing against Xbox, and the business model in the market at the time was to try and sell the most powerful games machine you could with all these amazing computer chips inside, and they were all very expensive. So PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo at the time were all losing money on every box they sold. The business model was to sell the box, you lose money on it, and then you get your money back by charging game developers to license games onto the games console. But Nintendo's share price were tanking. They were losing. So they did something a bit different. What they did was they created the Wii. Now, Nintendo actually made money on every single Wii box they sold. So they changed the way they do business. They changed their business model. And so they solved a problem for themselves, and the problem they solved for the customer was that all these powerful games consoles were really only attractive to like hardcore gamers. They weren't attractive to the family, they weren't attractive to younger kids. So they solved a problem for a different sector of the market. So the other thing you do is forget the past, and in fact, forget today. And what I mean by that is that, well, actually, does anyone know this guy? Anyone recognize this guy? Probably not, I don't think so. Anyone know this company? No? Nobody. Okay, so this guy, in 2004, Northern Light was a search company, and he's the CEO, and he said, the future of search is intelligent human-edited databases. The Google approach will not scale. So I guess this is why you've not heard of this company, right? No. So he fell into the danger of the curse of knowledge. And this is when you've been in your industry and you think you have so much knowledge about the industry that you can no longer look outside of that. You can no longer innovate. You struggle to change your business model because this is what you've always been doing. And it's like being in a bubble. And if you're inside a bubble, then when you speak to yourself, all you hear is yourself. It's an echo chamber. Yeah? So that's why you have to be really careful about accepting the status quo. Don't accept the status quo. The other thing you can do is ask what if. Ask what if questions. What if I could go to the moon? What if I could what if I could commercially create space flights? Then you can be, Google, that's what Virgin Atlantic's doing. So let's try a few. What if I could pay to use any person's car? Does anyone know which startup this is? It's probably not over here. Uber. Not quite. So this is paying to use anyone else's car. So it's probably my bad description. So there's actually two in the US one's called Relay, one's called Get Around. So you can actually you can rent out your own car. So people can book to use your car, they come, take the keys, drive off in your car. Okay? What about this one? This one's easier. Check all airline prices instantly. Come on. If you've fallen asleep, there'll be trouble. So Kayak is a good example of that. This one you must get. Make free voice calls worldwide. Thank you, thank God. Okay, so that what-if question thing, to put yourself in that situation, without worrying about what's going on at the moment, I think is a really good way of coming up and qualifying good ideas. And the thing is, if you have an idea, you also want to make it a big idea. Solve a big problem. And that's really important because solving the problem is what generates the value. And if we go back to our business model, a business model describes the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. So that means that the bigger the problem solved, the bigger the value. The bigger the value, the more money you're going to make because your company's going to be enormous, and then you can end up like these two guys and own a personal plane. That's Sergey and Larry from Google, by the way. So you might say, but hang on a minute, not all startup companies solve problems. What about Twitter? And you're right, that didn't really solve any problem at all. But I think we can probably say Twitter's, I would argue, is an exception to the rule. I mean, Twitter now does solve a problem in that it's an extremely noisy environment. There's information overload. It's a great way of sharing small amounts of information. But actually, when it started, for the first 2 years, it had 100,000 users. They were lucky they were in the West Coast. They managed to get investment. You're not going to get investment for a Twitter-style model here. In fact, nearly all a lot of the VCs I know actually turned Twitter down. They just said, yeah, that's going nowhere. So I think that's probably the exception to the rule, because there are always exceptions to the rule. So can you just tell me when I've got half an hour left? Yes. Great, thank you. So going back to my company we talked about earlier, actually, we started off as direct-to-consumer, solving the problem I wanted to solve. And there were lots of issues, probably timing in the market. But there's also a question about, was the problem painful enough? It was painful for me because I was traveling all around. But then we discovered actually that most people go to the same bars, the same pubs. They leave work, they go to their local pub. They don't need, every day, they don't need a new place to go to, because you live in one city, right? So there's a question about whether that was a big enough problem to solve. So we had to pivot that company to B2B. So it now provides personalization services for other people's data. So golden rule number 1, solve a big, fat, hairy problem, okay? Because otherwise, whatever business model you apply, you're probably going to have problems. So this is great. You've come up with an idea. You've discovered an idea. It's fantastic. What do you do next? Well, the second thing is validation. You've got your great idea. You think it's a big enough market. What do you do next? So the next thing you need to do is actually solve a problem really well for one person, which sounds a bit contradictory. But the reason this is important is because when you start your company, if you don't solve a problem from day one for somebody, then eventually you're going to run out of money because you won't be able to validate anything. You won't be able to prove that the seed of this great vision you have is a good idea. And that's because there are 5 core dimensions to a startup: team, product, funding, customers, and business model. And actually, if you don't solve a problem for an initial set of people, then what will happen is that you'll do too much of one of these things. So, and by that I mean you'll either hire too many people, so you'll run out of money. You'll either build too much product because you're not validating, whether this is a good thing or not, whether you're solving a problem for someone or not. So you'll build too much product, and then people won't be interested in using it. You'll take too much funding, which means you'll have no reason to have to validate the product because you've got $2 million in the bank, and you can just carry on, and you'll keep on building this thing that actually a small, not enough people want. And you won't prove that you're solving a problem for your customer, which means whatever business model you apply to it isn't going to work. Okay? So, and going back to the same research from earlier from the Startup Genome Project, they say that the number 1 cause of failure is premature scaling on one of those dimensions. Right? So, solving a big problem, but also when you launch that first version of your product, making sure that you're solving part of it for someone, so that someone can turn around and go, hey, I find this really useful. Okay? So who is this version 1 for? What does that problem solve for them? Well, even the biggest sites now that do lots of things, like Facebook, this is an old screenshot of Facebook, solved an original problem. Actually, Facebook, back in 2004, actually just solved the problem of students getting laid, to be honest. I mean, it solved the problem of people being able to look at other students and going, oh, I fancy her, I'd like to shag her. I mean, and if that's not true, then why would you have a poke button, right? I mean, you laugh, but this is how it started, right? This is how he got critical mass. So first 10,000 users, stripped them off the director of the university. Hey, you're all signed up to Facebook. Great, first 10,000, you're solving a problem for 10,000 users. And then you can solve it for the next group of users and the next group of users. And this is one of the biggest failings I see with startups that I help mentor, which is that the vision's usually great, fucking great vision, but they're not they don't have $10 million in the bank to go and build that to solve it for everyone. They're struggling to get the first 100,000, 500,000, 1 million people to use their service. Now, this is another one of my previous companies. In the middle there, Playtext. This was back in 2001. And this was a location-based mobile social network. It was really cool. Like, this is before Facebook. And it did all sorts of stuff. I mean, you can see the terrible website design, because this is 2001, 2002. And it had lots of stuff. It had an instant messenger chat, and you could see where people were and everything. But we had no idea what we were. I mean, look at that screen. Like, I mean, this was actually, and embarrassingly, this was in our investor deck, right? So we were going to investors going, hey, look, we're in the middle. We do everything. We're amazing. Bad idea. Because look, we're an internet community. We're a mobile location-based service. We're a mobile flirting app, and we're an instant messenger. Bad, all bad. So, don't do it like this. You've got to ask the question, who is it for, and what problem does it solve for them? Okay? So that brings me on to the next point, which is if you want to validate, you've got to communicate properly. Otherwise, you'll validate the wrong thing. So my next golden rule is communicate not what it does, but what the value it creates. Because it's the value which is going to be the basis of your business model, right? So with Playtex, we called it the mobile community, and we tried lots of things, mobile social network, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean anything, right? Really bad. What we could have said was maybe always know where the party is. Slightly better, starts to communicate some value. Oh, I want to go out, find out where the party is, great. Okay? So how you communicate is going to define whether you can validate your startup or not. Because otherwise, if you're not communicating clearly to a first set of people that you're solving a problem for, you're just validating the wrong thing. So you're going to get the wrong results, which means, whatever business model, again, you apply, it's not going to work. So who knows this guy? Man in the middle? Eric Ries. Great. And who's read this? Okay, 4 or 5 of you. Okay, that's a start. Okay, so this is a sort of new religion that Eric Ries has born the last couple of years, which is all about doing precisely that. It's about validating your assumptions. Okay, so it's like, I think this is a great business model. I think this is a great idea. And it's about finding out how you can quickly test that, in the cheapest possible way. Now, he says that he wrote this because his first company, Catalyst Recruitment, he said that because we did not understand the wants of our target customers. So they spent millions of dollars, and because they didn't understand their customers, so they didn't talk to their customers, they built the wrong thing and spent all this money, and the company wasn't a success. Now, talking to customers is all very well, but someone once said this. Does anyone know who this quote is? Henry Ford. Beer to this man in the front. Yes, Henry Ford. So Henry Ford, started the Ford Motor Company, and he's right. I mean, he's right. You ask people what they want, they have no idea. But if you ask the right questions and use the right framework, you can find out what their problems are, and then you can solve their problems. So don't ask them, do you want this? Just talk to them and find out, learn everything about them. Learn who their family are. Learn, what do they do? How do they spend their day? What are their fears, et cetera, et cetera. So lean is all about assumption testing. If at all possible, instead of asking someone, go out there and actually test these ideas you have, right? In fact, the way I'd describe it is proving as much as possible by spending as little as possible. And that's spending as little money, and that's spending as little time, okay, to quickly get out there and test this, to test your idea. There's actually a great example with, how many people use Dropbox? Better response, good. So you know what I'm talking about. So Dropbox, the guy who started Dropbox initially said he put a holding page up, nice and quick, that's good. Then I think he got like 3,000-4,000 people who saying, sort of signing up saying, hey, yeah, I want this thing called Dropbox. So he went off, down Sand Hill Road, I might have some water, Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, which is where all the venture capitalists are. And they said, well, it sounds like you're solving a problem, but I'm just not convinced it's a painful enough problem. I don't think this is a $100 million company or $1 billion company. Sinking files, this sort of stuff just doesn't. There are lots of companies out there that do it, and yeah, they're all a bit shit, but it doesn't really sound like a really painful problem. So he went away and he created a fake screen capture of exactly how he wanted his software to work. And he put that up on the website. Then he got 75,000 people signed up for his beta. And then he went back to the VCs and went, oh, look, now I've got 75,000 people, which validated his hypothesis that this software he wanted to create was actually a really good idea. And that's how he raised his money. So you always want to be looking for ways to test your theory. Be it try some AdWords, Facebook AdWords, whatever it is. And luckily, when you're talking to customers and when you get feedback and when you're going out there, there are frameworks you can use to help collate this data. This is something that from a company called Xplane, and it's their empathy map. And you can print this out, put this on the wall, massive, and cover it in Post-it notes, and sort of try and collate, how your customers really feel about their lives and the problem you're trying to solve. You can't really see them, but this one's actually I think this is an example of Microsoft Office Online. So the things at the top are things like, how they're feeling about think and feel. So, what their fears are, what their worries are. I'm fed up with paying for Microsoft licenses, but I'm worried about, people hacking into it online. So, it's a great way of collating that data from your target customer. Yeah. There's another great example of this. You've heard of this company? Yeah. Great. So Airbnb, guys, again, based upon a real problem they had, they moved to San Francisco, had nowhere to stay, thought, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe we should make it easier for people to find cheap places to stay. But they really struggled. They started, and Brian Chesky says he started in 2007. They ran until, I think, about 2009, it's 2010, I think, before they went to Y Combinator, which is an incubator in the States. And actually, he spent 6 months using his own service. So they got a third member of staff. There was no space in the friend's house they were staying in to stay. So he just started using his own service while he was working on the startup for 6 months. So he started to really understand what the challenges were of the people trying to rent out the places and what the challenges were for the people who actually wanted to rent rooms. So it's the perfect, validation of your model is by him using his service for 6 months. And I had an experience recently. So this is a CRM company. There are lots of them online called Nimble. And my sister runs a small company and wanted a better way of like tracking all her contacts and the sales and this sort of stuff. So I signed them up on this. And then I had a few problems with it. So I sent out a tweet saying, blah, 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 Nimble doesn't work properly. It's a bit rubbish, blah, 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 blah. And then I get this email like the next morning from the CEO of this company. This guy, I don't know this guy. This guy's in Los Angeles. He's got about 20 staff. They've raised $4 million investment. And the CEO reaches out to me, says, I saw your post on Twitter about importing notes from Nimble. Let's connect for a chat. I'd love to help. I chatted to this guy for an hour on Skype. He doesn't even know who I am. I mean, how many companies do you actually get doing that? How often do you use a service or use a European company that you get a tweet like that and then they phone you up and then you talk to them for half an hour? He's the CEO of the company. He's probably got better things to do. Actually, no, he's got nothing better to do than talk to his customers. So, I think that's a great real-world example of how that guy really understands his business. So, understanding your customer is everything. Golden rule number 4. And then, obviously, you've proven all these validations. You're going to write a business plan. No, you're not. Don't write a business plan. Who's used one of these? That's good. Cool. Okay, so this comes out of the whole lean startup mythology thing. For those that don't know how you use this, this is all, these are the key building blocks of your business model. It's pretty straightforward. I'm not going to run through it all in detail. And that was invented by this guy, Alexander Osterbahn, I think. He created it. He's from the University of Lucerne. And he created it as part of his PhD to design new ways of modeling businesses. Again, you can do the same thing. It's similar to the empathy map. It really makes you focus on, rather than writing long pages of text, it really makes you focus on the key elements of the business. Now, interestingly, this looks quite similar. This is a lean canvas. And actually, the only 4 blocks that are different are these. So this is Eric Ries's, basically, version of Alexander's Osterhoff's canvas. And it's very similar. But what's interesting about these 3 is these 3 are probably the most important 4 boxes if you want to raise money. I mean, people may disagree on this, but from my experience, the problem we've talked about, the solution to the problem that we've talked about, the key metrics, how you're going to measure the success of the business, and then the unfair advantage that your startup has. Okay? So when you're raising money, those are probably, I would say, the most 4 important boxes. Because the business model, cost structures, they can all be amended, they can all be changed. So going back to the fantastic world of business models, what do you do next? Well, and actually this guy looks a bit like this guy, doesn't he? Do you think they're a bit similar? I mean, Eric's a bit fatter in the face, that's because he's American, right? No? Anyway, just thought I'd say that. So, lean canvas, customer segments, right? Customer segments are back to targeting your customer. Who are you going to target? So, obviously, everyone wants to be mass market. iPod, mass market, good product. You could be segmented. So if you look on the left, you've got Richard Branson, Virgin Atlantic. He's got a segmented company because he runs Virgin Atlantic airline. You've got luxury customers, and you've got the guy on the right who's definitely in economy. Or you could be possibly, and that's challenging because as a startup, you've got limited resources, and if you're going to target a segmented group of people, you have to communicate to two different groups of people. So you're diluting, your very limited resources. I've suddenly become louder. That's interesting. Or you could be niche, but I wouldn't recommend that because you're a startup. And if you're a startup, being niche, you're going to end up with a lifestyle business, so we'll get rid of niche. Or you could be multi-sided. And being multi-sided has challenges as well because it's a chicken and egg situation. So magazines are a multi-sided model because you have readers and you have advertisers, but without readers, you don't have any advertisers. So you're fighting two battles, okay? But whatever go-to-market strategy you decide on, or whatever segment you decide on, it's going to change. And that's why it's fine to start with a small group and then grow to a bigger group. Because does anyone know what this is? This is Google before it was Google. Okay? It used to be called Backrub. It used to be a search engine at Stanford for students. So to start with, it was very niche, just serving students. You could, search academic papers on the Stanford server. Second one, it became mass. And then finally, it became multi because they're now an advertising platform. Google are an advertising company. So in 2003, they bought Overture, launched their AdWords, and now they're a multi-sided model. So it's going to evolve as your business grows, and that's why you should not be scared of starting with to solve one problem as one small part of a much bigger problem. So remember the empathy map, it's a great tool. And if you use it correctly, then you'll have a realistic go-to-market strategy. Another golden rule, because that's one of the biggest failings I see, is how to get your first step as a startup. Okay, next part, revenue streams. This is pretty straightforward. Revenue models, I'm sure you all know. Selling, so Amazon sells books, nice and easy. Renting cars, licensing, subscription, consumption, commission. All pretty straightforward. I think actually those are really easy to understand. Everyone gets those. What's more important is actually pricing models. So fixed pricing, would be, cost of a book, for example. Variable pricing, great example we talked about earlier, kayak, airlines. Because depending on what pricing model you choose, it's going to affect different parts of your business model and that business canvas. So with fixed pricing, the fixed pricing, the price you set depends upon the value. To some extent, it depends upon the size of the problem you're solving for someone. Right? It also depends upon the quality, right? So it depends directly upon the value the person associates with the size of the problem you're solving. Second one is customer segment. If you're going for Richard Branson, he can afford more. If you're going for the man with the beer can, you're not going to get much money out of him. And then quantity, obviously, as well. If you buy lots of something, low cost. Variable, negotiating skills, because every contract's different, not very scalable probably. Real-time markets are variable as well. And then auctions. Okay, so this gives you huge flexibility, but more importantly, the pricing model you choose is going to fundamentally affect the way that what's contained on your business model, on that business canvas. So you need to be realistic about the time it takes money, because the time it takes to make money from your customers, because it's always going to take you longer than you think. And it's always going to take you longer to raise money as well. And that's one of the things I want to touch on as well, because obviously, it affects your business model. Do I start charging now? Do I start charging later? Well, that depends. Can you survive now? Or do you need more? You need to raise money in order to survive that length of time, right? So this is where you get to the point where you're talking about like how efficient is your model? How quickly can you create money? How low are your costs? How low is your burn rate? And the canvas covers all those things. And you really have to think about them, because you do not want to run out of money. I've run out of money more than once. And what happens is you're just against the wall, either with the bank or with your investors. It's a horrible place to be. So because of that, I just want to talk a little bit about raising money. First of all, don't do it like this. Don't write a business plan. Nobody reads business plans. I don't know any VCs or angel investors that read business plans. Never do this. Bad idea. What you actually want is 15 to 20 slides. That's all. Keynote, PowerPoint, whatever takes your fancy, bits of paper if you want. And it needs to contain these things. Company purpose in a single sentence. If you can't describe what your company does in a single sentence, you need to. Don't even go past the first slide, because you don't know what your company's doing, basically. Second thing, problem, we talked about. Painful problem, big problem. What is the solution? Why now? Why is it important now? Why does this problem need to be solved now? Why wasn't it solved before? Why is this, make sure that timing is critical. I showed you my mobile social network before, way too early, 2001, right? So 3 years before Facebook started, 7 years before the iPhone came out, way, way too early. Timing is really critical. Market size, competition, so be aware of your competition, but don't obsess about them. Product, business model. So revenue model, pricing, average size, lifetime, sales, customer pipeline, this is all pretty straightforward. Team, financials, P&L, and cash flow. And if you can't remember all that, go to Sequoia's website. Go to this URL, and there is a list of the slides that should be in your investment deck. And you can't really get it from anyone better, because Sequoia Capital are probably one of the most famous VCs in the world, certainly one of the most successful. It's a great, if the first thing I do if someone says, I don't know what to put in my business model deck, is I point them at that website. So 3 last things very quickly that I think are important. Do 5-year projections. This sounds ridiculous, but somebody you talk to when you're trying to raise money is going to ask for 5-year projections. So you might as well do them at the beginning. It's a pain in the ass. They'll all be complete bullshit. Nobody will believe them, but they'll still ask for them. So do 5-year projections. Second one, always calculate on a unit basis. Don't have on your slide deck, we are going to take 2% of this $50 billion market. Investors, there's nothing worse. Investors hate it. Work up from the unit. Work up that it costs us X, and we're going to sell it for X, and for each person, and this is why, blah, 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 blah. Work up from a unit, not from the top down. Work bottom up. Okay? And then lastly, don't drown the reader. Don't give too much detail. Usually, the deck is there, basically. Your business plan actually is a sales tool. When you send that to someone, all you're selling is the meeting. You're selling the meeting to get in front of their face so you can persuade them or drug them or get them drunk to give you money. Right? So, it's a sales tool. And I see a lot of startup entrepreneurs putting way too much into the business plan so that, So my definition of the business model is your business model is the way you profit from the value you create from others. And I think if you remember that, personally, if you remember that definition rather than the first definition, it will keep you on the right track. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So before the audience warms up with the questions they have, for me, entrepreneurship is always a balancing act. Not don't do too much of this and don't do little of that. And this competitor issue is also kind of, from one hand, you shouldn't be obsessed with your competitors, but on the other hand, as Colin was telling, he could learn from competitors quite a lot, how the business is going, what the logic of the business is, what are the key players, how it's going on. What do you recommend? How much you should learn about your competitors, and or you should completely avoid them? Or
no, I think you should be aware of who's out there. If nothing else, your investors are probably going to ask you, what do you think to this? But I don't think you should. If you visit, I don't know if you have TechCrunch here or people read TechCrunch, but I get a lot of entrepreneurs, they just get wrapped up, they're reading TechCrunch and they become obsessed with some of their competitors. And normally they're American competitors. Normally the American competitors have got more money. Normally they look more flash. Normally they look, and you always think on the outside that startups you're talking to are always doing well. And that's because quite rightly and understandably, if you're an entrepreneur running a startup, you want to give a good impression. You want to be positive about what's happening. Okay? But actually, most startups are in crisis all the time. there, you open the door and you're like, fuck me, what the hell? You know, when you actually find out what's going on in the company, it's a complete mess, usually. And even some quite big companies are a complete mess. You'd be quite surprised. So from that point of view, I think it's very easy to look at, you know, the press articles and look at the thing and think that a company's doing well, but you don't really know until you look at metrics. So my advice would be aware, but you know, keep
get frightened.
Keep them arm's length. Because the more you use them, you know, the more you're just going to think that that's the way to do it. And I've done it myself. You start, oh God, they've got this functionality. We should do that. We should do that. Bad idea. Stun them into silence.
Yeah. Then one particular thing I wanted to ask you also about that. You said about the focus. That it's important that not to do for everybody, but you just pick your target, who's your one customer, and move from there. But very often the problem is that you have found a solution which applies to very many segments, and you actually have no clue which one would actually work. That you kind of have to test them out. That there is no. It looks like there's no better way to find out which one is the best. Looked also with a mobile social network that you identified quite a number of nice markets and nice opportunities. What would you suggest to a startup that how to get to a focus point fast? That you start with multiple possible business opportunities. How to get to this one to focus on?
Well, I mean, ultimately, you've got to analyze which you think is best, and you've got to pick one. Right?
Okay.
I mean, it's that simple.
Okay.
I mean, nobody, everyone says, well, I think this is going to work, but until you try it, like, you know, it's just an assumption. It really is you're just assuming, well, for all these reasons, I think, you know, we should target this market first. But you can always change. And the other reason why it's important to focus is because if you don't say, right, for 2 months, we're going to do this to these people, and really focus on that, then 2 things will happen. One is that if you don't focus after 2 months, you don't know whether it failed because you didn't focus on it, or whether it failed because it's the wrong market, right? And then the second thing, what was I going to say? Second thing, completely forgot the second thing.
Focus,
I can't
picking
remember.
it. Okay.
Gone, but I'm sure it'll come back. I think the guy at the back was first.
I would like to ask you, how do you keep your concurrents demotivated to deal with you?
It was the question, how do you keep your team motivated?
No, how do you keep your competitors demotivated to
follow you?
That's a great
to
question.
come at you?
That's a great question. I don't know, put a horse's head in their bed, maybe. I don't know. That'll be pretty demotivating. I think keeping one thing I find being between the US and being here is that we are a cynical bunch. Like, I mean, especially the British. I mean, we're pretty negative. We tend to see the problems, right? We're sort of engineering minded. And the Americans are all annoying and shiny and, oh my God, it's awesome! And the problem with that is that, with being the engineering type, is that, you know, that's quite overwhelming. You know, when you have a competitor in the US that's all very positive. And I think actually we need to do more of that. I'm serious about this. I think we need to be more self-promoting. We need to be, you know, you talked about networking earlier. Europeans are appalling at networking. I mean, it's embarrassing. Like, you know, I mean, you have to fuel us with lots of alcohol, which is fine by me, but like, then we're quite friendly. But like, it's just, you know, it's really important. Like, so, one is that the networking thing is good, but to try and answer your question, I really think we do need to be more, you just need to be a bit more confident and say, actually, fuck it, this startup's really good. This is going to be a $100 million company. And you need to present that. You need to present that when you talk to people. You know, you need to keep grounded, so you need to be realistic, but usually running a startup, there's enough things going wrong to keep you grounded. Like when you walk back into the office, you know, stuff's not working, one of your staff's just left, you can't find the right developer. Like, so there's enough to keep you grounded. But outwardly, you really need to, and there are lots of other benefits to that. There's lots of other benefits. People will want to work with you. You'll seem the most attractive company to work with. Investors will start believing, you know, the rhetoric. I mean, you know, Americans are very good at the marketing. They build a shitty product, brilliant marketing, great go-to-market strategy, great branding. We do the opposite in Europe a lot of the time. You know, amazing engineering, really shit message to market. You know, and then when you ask someone, you know, over a beer, how is it? Well, it's quite good, but there are all these problems with it. Like, oh, like, no, it's brilliant. So honestly, that I genuinely think that's, you know, and that will then come across in the PR that you get. You know, you get better coverage. You know, so to some extent, especially online, where what you present is so, you know, it's virtually, it's not necessarily real, and you have some control over that. I think you just have to play them, you know, play your competitors at their own game, basically. Sorry, there were two other questions.
I am a beginner in this field, and my question is maybe quite easy to answer for more experienced people, but the question is, I know a huge problem in Estonia, which need to be solved. I knew two parties who must contact each other to solve this problem, but I'm afraid where is the place where I can get profit? If I talk out my idea, they don't need me anymore.
Right, okay. I think there's two things immediately come to mind. One is that I think, as I said, I'm often asked about, oh, how much do I tell, you know, people about my idea? Ideas, you know, someone else will have thought of your idea, you can guarantee it, but they're not executing on it, right? And it's the execution that's really difficult. So, I mean, I would go and talk to both parties separately and find a value you can add in between them. You know, there must be something. You know, I'm happy to talk, you know, to you afterwards and see if I can think of something. But there must be something where you can leverage value between the two of them to make it happen. Because they're not working together, so you need to understand why they're not working together, and you know. And even if it's an obvious, you know, you might think it's a really obvious thing, but quite often with existing companies or organizations, they're so focused, they're so institutionalized, that even if you tell them it's a good idea, they probably won't believe you. So I think you can't, you know, I wouldn't worry about them taking the idea, I'd worry about executing on it.
Also, one thing to keep in mind is that not every idea is a good business idea. That some ideas are just too good ideas, that you make a world better place, and you can't earn anything from that. One of my friends told me a story when European Union came out with euro and the coins, and he had this brilliant idea that we should make these all these coin collectors, we should make life easier for them and make this European map on cardboard, and in each country you have a €1 coin, so you have a full set of all the different €1 coins. And he knew people in the cardboard industry. So he went to them and told them that you should make such a thing. And they actually did. And they sold a couple million tons of cardboard, just plugging...
Million tons? How many coin collectors are there in Estonia? That's a lot of cardboard.
Not in Estonia, not the whole Europe. Okay, and, but he didn't earn anything except gratitude from his friend and a big lunch. So there are ideas and business ideas. So some ideas are just good for keeping your network going. Okay, we have more questions.
Yeah. So in Estonia, we start in a small market. We're a very tiny country. And of course, we are trying to look out. I wonder if you could address the problem of doing validation when you're not there, when you've got to be thinking global. And you can't just talk to your neighbor because they're in your tiny market.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for location, and thinking about, you know, I mean, I started my first two companies in Cambridge, and it's only 40 minutes on the train to London, but and although it was, you know, the ecosystem even in London wasn't as developed then, but the point is that being surrounded by the money, being near to the money and being near to your market and everything else does just make a really big difference. So, I mean, maybe there's a question there that actually, do you just pick up and move for 6 months or 3 months of that? I mean, you know, I'm serious. If you're serious about the business and you're saying, well, you know, our first market is Germany or our first market is whatever, do you actually find a way to just go there for 2-3 months to validate it? You know, if you can't do it, if it's not an online business where you can't reach your market virtually, online, or engage someone, hire someone for the incentivize someone in the team who's local. I literally last week had a girl who I spoke to who lives up in Leeds, which is a sort of small town 3 hours north of London. And she was saying, I can't find any angel investors up here. And I was like, well, okay, well, have you thought about, for your type of company, have you thought about coming to London? It's like, I don't want to move to London. I had to say, well, at some point, you've got to decide, you really want to, is this business the most important thing in your life? Because if it's not, it's probably going to fail. So at some point, you have to, I'm not sure whether that really answers your question, but.
I have a question that is it possible to make big business outside of Silicon Valley?
Sorry, say again.
Is it possible to do big business outside Silicon Valley?
Is it possible to do big business outside Silicon Valley?
Yeah, but you also mentioned that Silicon Valley is kind of different animal in itself, that you would get money for Twitter and not everywhere else.
I think it is. I mean, loosely, I'd say that if you're doing consumer, like if you're doing direct to consumer online, which does not have a business model attached, or the business model requires scale. So if you need, if you've got that two-sided model where you need 10 million users to make money from advertising, just move to Silicon Valley. For that clear vertical, where we need 10 million users before we, or have your engineering team here and then move to Silicon Valley, and have a business, an office there and an address, because you'll just be in so much pain here trying to raise money. There isn't the early adopter market in the same way that there is. You've got 500,000, 1 million people all in San Francisco who are obsessed with anything online. Like they're weird. It's a bunch of weirdos. It really is. So if you're doing that, but everything else, no, I think we can do it in Europe. So anything with a sensible business model, an enterprise, SaaS, or consumer things where there's a revenue attached. If you're solving a painful enough problem that people will pay for, then yeah, of course you can run a company from here. And actually, sometimes it's better to be in New York or London or some other place, because
why?
Well, because if you're one of my friends runs Conversocial. Now his clients are big brands. It's a customer support, online customer support platform for brands like clothing companies, department stores, that sort of stuff. All those companies are based in big cities. They're not based in San Francisco. So there are advantages to being here. You have to leverage the advantages you have here, and one is definitely cheap engineering. Finding engineers now in West Coast is incredibly hard.
More questions?
Yeah, thanks. Ideas. One small question, like what kind of ideas are you looking for? Meaning, what sector? Like probably you don't want to hear everything, but what are your interests? Where like
me personally, or,
yes,
or
yes.
do I think?
I saw your ideas.
Well, yeah. So basically, you're asking what areas excite me at the moment.
Or you want to work on, or you want to listen and.
That's a good question.
Go forward.
I think I think Google Glass is coming out. My problem is basically I'm early to market, and I've spent my entire life doing stuff too early to market. So I really have to be careful. The companies that were successful of mine have been timed right in the market, but the stuff that excites me is all the innovative stuff. It's the new stuff. So Google Glasses, which are coming out now, you might have seen them online, where everything you control it through. I think they're going to be huge. I think actually they're going to be much bigger than people realize. So that excites me. Medical excites me. Sorry?
Neurogaming?
Neurogaming? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But I was thinking more about, actually fixing people. Like, although maybe there's a tie in there. I don't know. Internet of Things, I think is fantastic. Internet of Things is a great space because people are used to paying for a physical object. So things like Fitbit, Nike Fuel Band, all those things where, you're sent some little bit of plastic, which is probably worth nothing, but people will pay a subscription because they understand they're used to paying something tangible in their hand. They feel they're getting value. So I think the Internet of Things is going to be really interesting with your thermostat in your home and all that sort of stuff. And 3D printing as well, but that's still a bit early as well.
Which kind of companies you mentor, or where you feel you have the most expertise in helping the startups?
That's a good question as well. Yeah, I mean, SaaS, any SaaS stuff online, especially
software as a service,
software as a service, direct-to-consumer stuff, biased towards sort of early stage, kind of seed, angel, Series A. I've got less experience, sort of Series B, Series C. But yeah, I mean, I think anything. There's so much overlap, so many similarities between businesses, and quite often for startups, the challenges are still the same.
What do you see? What the guys who use these business models and come to you, where do you see they misuse the tool, or where, despite using the business model, they still lack something, or they're still...
Well, it's difficult. I mean, you can only ever advise. So it is painful to... there's a company I advise... I was going to say her name, I probably shouldn't. And, you know, we were literally having arguments because I was saying, look, you know, what you're suggesting... Because she had a direct-to-consumer iPhone app. But after a year, she came back and said, oh, actually, I think everything you said was right. But, like, I mean, that's because... You know, I've made the mistakes before, and it's very hard to accept. You know, when you're very passionate about something, it's very hard to accept. You know, that what you believe isn't right. So, you know, it's just trial and error. But I think often with the good thing about the validation thing is that it takes the argument away from it being personal, and you can use this with your team. So rather than you both arguing, no, I think we should have this functionality. No, it should be this. You can go, okay, fine. Let's just find a way of testing this, because neither of us know who's right. So let's just put it out to market, if it works, you know, or fake it, or find some way of doing it, and it removes the arguments, right, from the team.
Okay.
Oh, one more. One last one.
Yeah. Hello. It was a great talk you had. Thanks.
Thank you.
But there's a question I think almost all of the starting entrepreneurs have, is that how to make a maximum out of the available resources.
So you mean cash?
Any resources, cash, time, places available.
Okay, if I can answer that in one sentence, I'd be a rich man. Can you narrow it down a bit? Or, I mean, I think it's prioritization. It's probably my answer. In all seriousness, it's prioritizing what's really important. And I think. If you're an entrepreneur, normally people are normally optimists if they're entrepreneurs. So you'll underestimate how long it'll take you to raise money. You'll overestimate how many users you're going to get. You'll underestimate how long it'll take you to make money, you know, from your customers. You know, all those things. So I think whenever you're discussing things and you plan or you prioritize, I think doing two things. One is putting it through like a realism filter, so you know, double, or in fact triple, probably the amount of time you think it's going to take you to raise money, for example. Double the amount of time you think it's going to take you to build whatever you're building, or your engineers tell you how long it's going to build. Double it. And then the second thing is prioritization. Just be really ruthless, and you can only prioritize properly if you're focused. If you're struggling to do everything, you're not focused enough. Like, get rid of some things. Just write everything down and go, what is it, you know, what of all these things we want to build or we want to do, or all these partners we want to talk to, you know, which are the ones that actually, you know, really important? And you can only do that if you understand what problem you're solving. So if you're clear about what problem you're solving for the first group of people, everything else becomes easy, because you just go, right, do we need to talk to this person about this problem we're solving in the next 3 months or 6 months? No, right, forget about it. Even if it's a good opportunity, just let it go. Like, you know, I was told by a salesman once, like, the most important thing about selling is knowing when, like, not to sell, like when to actually turn down a deal. And it's kind of the same thing. So if you're really clear about what you're trying to do, then I think it's easy to then prioritize.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow. Fantastic. Thank you.
So you travel a lot, so this is a fun way to find out where you have been.
Includes a game version for children. Okay, thanks. That'll be for me then.